Are you absolutely certain, Miss Vance? This is your third time standing here today, and now you want to marry him? The clerk, a woman named Beverly with hair styled like a perpetually surprised bird's nest, squinted at me over her spectacles. Her voice, laced with a familiar blend of pity and thinly veiled judgment, was the last straw. My jaw ached from clenching, my heart hammered like a trapped bird against my ribs, but the fire blazing in my eyes was far hotter than any shame. "Yes, Beverly," I snapped, my voice a low, furious growl that surprised even myself. "I am absolutely certain. Let's get this done. 10 minutes. That's all it takes, right?" My gaze flickered to the man beside me, Sebastian Thorne. He was a stranger, a walking silhouette of expensive tailoring and controlled fury, who just moments ago had been pacing the same linoleum floor, a picture of raw betrayal mirroring my own. We'd bonded over shared abandonment, an unspoken understanding passing between us as we both received the same gut-wrenching news from the same sneering clerk. Our respective partners, Julian Blackwell and some fiancé of Sebastian's, had both ghosted us, leaving us stranded at the Manhattan City Hall, mere steps away from a future that had vanished into thin air. He was 32, I was 27, and in that instant, 2 lives had derailed spectacularly. 10 minutes it is, Sebastian rumbled, his voice a low, dangerous purr that sent a shiver down my spine. There was a primal intensity in his dark eyes, a predator's glint that acknowledged my own seething rage. He wasn't just agreeing, he was committing to the chaos. It was less a proposal, more a pact, a silent, furious agreement to burn down the entire charade. I still remember the rain lashing against the grimy windows of City Hall that night, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. The city outside was a blurred watercolor of yellow cabs and neon signs, utterly oblivious to the personal apocalypse unfolding within these sterile walls. Julian Blackwell. The name was a bitter taste on my tongue, a constant reminder of 3 years wasted, 3 proposals accepted, 3 wedding dates set, and 3 times left utterly, humiliatingly, alone at the altar. The finality of it all hit me like a physical blow, a cold, hard truth that solidified the icy knot in my stomach. He wasn't coming. Not this time. Not ever again. My fingers, still trembling from the shock, clutched the crisp, white document Beverly slid across the counter. My hand moved with a defiant autonomy, signing my name with a flourish that felt both reckless and liberating. Harper Vance, soon to be Harper Thorne. The ink bled slightly, a visual echo of the pain seeping into my very being, but also a dark promise of retribution. "There," I declared, pushing the document back with a force that made the counter rattle. My voice was surprisingly steady now, a steel edge replacing the earlier tremor. "It's done!" Sebastian's signature, bold and unwavering, was already beside mine. He hadn't hesitated, hadn't flinched. He looked at me then, a long, assessing look that seemed to strip away the veneer of my composure and see the raw, exposed nerves beneath. "To new beginnings, Harper," he said, and there was a strange inflection in his voice, a hint of something deeper than mere anger. "Or spectacular ends," I countered, forcing a brittle smile. The weight of the diamond I was supposed to be wearing, the ghost of Julian's touch, the dreams I'd woven, it all pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. But beneath it, a tiny, defiant spark ignited. This wasn't an ending. This was a demolition. And from the ashes, I swore, something new would rise, something stronger, something unforgiving. As we walked out into the relentless New York rain, the city's cacophony seemed to dim. The bright lights of Times Square, visible in the distance, felt like a cruel mockery. But with Sebastian Thorne, my 10-minute husband, by my side, I felt a strange sense of perverse power. The world had betrayed me. Julian had shattered my trust. But I wouldn't crumble. Instead, I would redefine myself, starting with this utterly insane, utterly defiant act. I was Harper Vance, and I was furious. And furious women, I knew, were capable of anything. The silence inside Sebastian's obsidian black SUV was heavy, thick enough to suffocate. Outside, the rain continued to lash against the glass, blurring the neon lights of Manhattan into streaks of mocking color. I sat in the passenger seat, my hands trembling so violently I had to tuck them under my thighs. The adrenaline that had fueled my "I do" was evaporating, leaving behind a cold, hollow crater of pure, unadulterated rage. "You're shaking," Sebastian said. It wasn't a question. He didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on the gridlock of Fifth Avenue, his knuckles white against the leather steering wheel. "I'm not shaking," I lied, my voice cracking. "I'm vibrating. There's a difference." I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. 27 missed calls, 52 text messages, all from Julian. My thumb hovered over the screen, tempted to smash it against the dashboard. Instead, I opened the last message. "Harper, baby, please understand, the merger is at a tipping point. If I left the boardroom now, I'd lose the $120 million deal. I'm doing this for our future. I'll make it up to you. Dinner at Le Bernardin tomorrow. Love you." A hysterical laugh bubbled up in my throat. $120 million? That was the price of my dignity. That was the cost of standing me up for the third time in front of a government clerk who looked at me like I was a charity case. "He thinks he can buy me a lobster tail and everything will be fine," I muttered, more to myself than to the stranger who was now legally my husband. 3 years, Sebastian. I gave that man 3 years of my life. I supported him when his startup was nothing but a desk in a basement. And now, I'm just a line item in his schedule that keeps getting pushed to the next quarter. "Julian Blackwell," Sebastian said, the name sounding like a curse in his deep baritone. "I know of him. He's a shark. But sharks eventually run out of oxygen if they stay in the same place too long." I turned to look at him. "And what about you? Who stood you up? Who was so important that they let a man like you wait for 6 hours in a plastic chair?" "He called me 5 minutes ago. He thinks I'm still at City Hall, crying into a paper cup." "Then show him," Sebastian said, a slow, predatory smirk spreading across his face. "Show him exactly what a $120 million mistake looks like." I grabbed my phone and snapped a photo of the marriage certificate resting on my lap, my new last name, Thorne, clearing visible in the harsh glow of the interior light. I didn't add a caption. I didn't need to. I hit send and watched the little blue bubble vanish. 5 seconds later, my phone exploded. Julian was calling. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. "Aren't you going to answer?" Sebastian asked. "No," I said, staring at the flashing name on the screen with a cold, detached hatred. I want him to feel the silence. I want him to wonder who Sebastian Thorne is and why his understanding fiancé just traded him in for a superior model. I looked out the window as we passed a massive billboard for Blackwell Holdings. Julian's face was there, smiling, arrogant, untouchable. I felt a hot sting in my eyes, but I refused to let a single tear fall. He had taken my time, my trust, and my heart. But he wouldn't take my future. Where are we going? I asked as Sebastian turned onto a quiet, tree-lined street in the Upper East Side. To my apartment, he replied. We have a lot to discuss, Miss Thorne. If we're going to make this lie look like the truth, we need to start acting like a couple who didn't meet over a shared hatred of bureaucratic paperwork. As the car pulled into the underground garage of a sleek glass and steel high-rise, I realized the magnitude of what I had done. I had married a stranger to hurt an ex. It was impulsive. It was dangerous. It was probably insane. But as I stepped out of the car and felt the weight of Sebastian's heavy wool coat draped over my shoulders, I knew one thing for certain. Julian Blackwell was going to regret the day he chose a boardroom over me. The penthouse was a cathedral of glass, steel, and expensive silence, perched high above the glowing, frantic veins of Manhattan. Sebastian tossed his keys onto a white marble console table with a sharp clack that echoed through the cavernous living room. The air here felt thin, pressurized by the sudden gravity of the legal bond we had just forged in 10 minutes of madness. Make yourself at home, Sebastian said, gesturing vaguely toward the Italian leather sofas that looked more like museum exhibits than furniture. The guest suite is down the hall to the left. My housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, keeps it stocked for guests I never actually invite. I didn't sit. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the tiny, scurrying lights of the yellow cabs below. Is this where you are going to bring her, Elena? Sebastian walked to a wet bar and poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal tumbler. He didn't offer me one. Elena liked the view. She didn't care much for what was inside the walls, which, in hindsight, should have been my first clue. He took a slow sip, his eyes tracking the rain streaks on the glass. Why did you do it, Harper? Truly? Most women would have just smashed his car windows and blocked his number. You chose a much more permanent form of arson. I turned around, the fire in my gut flickering back to life. Because smashing windows is a tantrum, Sebastian. It's temporary. I wanted Julian to feel a permanent shift in his universe. I wanted him to know that while he was busy negotiating his precious $120 million deal, I was busy replacing him entirely. I wanted to be the one who walked away first, for once in 3 agonizing years. Sebastian studied me over the rim of his glass, his gaze clinical and sharp. You're vindictive. I like that. It's a survival trait in this city. It's not just vindictiveness, I snapped, my hand instinctively drifting to the soft curve of my stomach. It's necessity. I'm playing for higher stakes now. The room went deathly still. Sebastian's eyes narrowed, dropping to where my hand rested against the silk of my dress. He set the glass down with calculated precision. Harper, tell me you didn't just sign a marriage certificate with me while carrying a Blackwell heir. The silence stretched for 10 heartbeats. My pulse hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I'm 6 weeks along, I said, my voice trembling but defiant. I reached into my bag and pulled out a crumpled sonogram photo, the one I had intended to show Julian over a celebratory wedding dinner that never happened. I found out 4 days ago. I was stupid enough to think a baby would finally make him show up. I thought it would make him realize that life isn't just a series of corporate acquisitions. Sebastian stepped closer, his presence looming, a scent of sandalwood and expensive gin surrounding him. He took the photo, staring at the tiny, flickering gray shape. Does he know? No, I whispered, and I don't want him to. He chose his board meetings. He can have them. But he doesn't get this. He'll find out, Sebastian countered, his voice low. Julian Blackwell is a bloodhound for his property. Once you start showing, he'll do the math. He'll come for you with an army of lawyers. Let him, I hissed. I'll burn every bridge until he has nowhere left to stand. I refuse to be anyone's second choice. Sebastian handed the photo back, a dark glint dancing in his eyes. My mother is dying, Harper. Congestive heart failure. Her only wish is to see me settled, to know the Thorne estate won't be carved up by vultures. So you need a fortress, and I need a wife. We will tell the world this baby is mine. We will make it the most believable lie in Manhattan. You do that? I breathed. In return, you get the Thorne name and my legal team. I will provide a $50,000 monthly allowance to ensure you never need a dime from Julian. But there are rules. No contact with him, and we live here, together. We play the part of the whirlwind romance. I took a deep breath, the weight of the secret feeling slightly lighter. Deal. Good. Go get some sleep. Tomorrow we meet my mother. And Harper? Destroy that sonogram. From this moment on, that child is a Thorne. If you ever let Julian think otherwise, the protection ends. I nodded, walking into the master suite. I lay on the charcoal silk bed, staring at the ceiling. My phone vibrated with one last text from Julian. Harper, stop being dramatic. I'm coming over now. Don't make me angry. I didn't reply. I simply turned the phone off. The war had officially begun. The sterile, oppressive scent of antiseptic and industrial lavender hit me the moment we stepped into the private wing of New York Presbyterian. Beside me, Sebastian was a pillar of cold composure, but I could feel the tension radiating from his frame. He was a man preparing for a different kind of boardroom battle, one where the stakes were life and legacy. Remember, he whispered, his voice a low vibration near my ear as we approached Suite 402. We've been seeing each other in secret for months. You were the one who made me realize life was more than just the next acquisition. Make her believe it, Harper. Her heart can't take anything less than the truth we've manufactured. I nodded, adjusting the massive $120,000 diamond ring on my finger. A Thorne heirloom that felt like a golden shackle. I'm a quick study, Sebastian. Just follow my lead. Eleanor Thorne looked like a fragile porcelain doll. Once the Iron Lady of New York's elite, she was now translucent, her skin mapped with blue veins. When we entered, her obsidian eyes, exactly like Sebastian's, snapped open with terrifying clarity. Sebastian, she rasped, you're late. I thought you'd let the doctors finish me off before showing your face. I was securing the future, Mother, Sebastian said, his voice softening into a tone I hadn't heard. He took her hand and pulled me forward. I want you to meet Harper, my wife. The silence was heavy enough to trigger the heart monitor. Eleanor's gaze drifted from Sebastian to the rock on my hand. She studied me like a grandmaster evaluating a chess move. His wife? The Harper Vance? The woman who is supposed to marry that Blackwell boy? My heart skipped. Everyone in this circle knew everything. I stepped forward, putting on the performance of a lifetime. Julian was a mistake I almost made, Eleanor, I said, my voice steady and ironclad. Sebastian was the reason I didn't. We didn't want a spectacle. We just wanted each other. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. You have fire, girl. I told him he needed someone who would bite back. She looked at her son. Is it true? Or is this another strategy to keep the board happy? Sebastian leaned in and pressed a lingering kiss to my temple. The warmth was dangerously real. It's the only strategy that matters, Mother. And there's more. I took a deep breath, placing my hand over my stomach. We're starting a family, Eleanor. You're going to be a grandmother. The monitor began to beep faster. Eleanor's eyes filled with brilliant tears. She reached out, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "A thorn," she whispered. "A legacy. You've given me a reason to stay until the spring." Outside in the hallway, my legs felt like jelly. That was intense. "You are perfect," Sebastian said, his eyes dark with unreadable emotion. My phone buzzed. It was a video from Julian, standing in my apartment, throwing my clothes into a suitcase. "You think you can marry Thorne to get back at me? I'll tell the world you're carrying my kid. You belong to me." I felt a wave of cold fury. I looked at Sebastian, who was watching the screen with lethal calmness. "He thinks I belong to him," I hissed. "He's about to find out that Harper Vance died at City Hall. Harper Thorne doesn't take prisoners." Sebastian rested his hand on the small of my back. "Then let's go, Mrs. Thorne. We have a war to win." Julian stepped into my personal space, ignoring Sebastian. He smelled of expensive scotch and desperation. "You're insane," he hissed, low enough so only I could hear. "You married him in 10 minutes." The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a swirling vortex of champagne, silk, and whispered scandals. This was the annual Blackwell Charity Gala, a cruel irony considering Julian didn't have a charitable bone in his body. Sebastian had insisted we attend. "If you hide, you're a victim," he'd said while fastening a choker of black pearls around my neck. "If you show up, you're a predator." I stood at the top of the marble staircase, my hand resting on Sebastian's forearm. I wore a crimson gown that hugged every curve, intentionally highlighting the subtle, almost invisible change in my silhouette. I didn't look like a woman who had been jilted. I looked like a woman who had been liberated. "Deep breaths, Harper," Sebastian murmured, his eyes scanning the crowd. "He's at the 10 o'clock position, near the ice sculpture." I looked. There he was, Julian Blackwell, looking smug in a tuxedo that probably cost more than my first car. He was holding court with a group of investors, laughing at something one of them said. Then his eyes drifted toward the stairs. The laugh died in his throat. His glass tilted precariously as he froze, his gaze locked on me, and then on the man standing beside me. "Let's make our entrance," I whispered, my heart racing not with fear, but with a cold, sharp hunger for justice. As we descended, the room fell into a rhythmic silence, the kind that precedes a storm. Conversations withered, necks craned. We didn't head for the bar, we headed straight for Julian. "Julian?" I said, my voice carrying just enough to ensure the nearby socialites heard me. "Lovely party, though I noticed the centerpieces are a bit recycled, much like your promises." Julian's face went through a fascinating transformation, from shock to a deep, ugly shade of purple. "Harper, what the hell is this? What are you doing here with him?" "That's Mrs. Thorne to you, Blackwell." Sebastian intervened, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that commanded the space. He stepped slightly in front of me, a subtle display of ownership that made Julian's eyes twitch. "I believe you two had a brief acquaintance? It's a shame it didn't work out, though I suppose I should thank you for being so consistently unreliable." "Inuits to spite me? Do you think this fake-ass marriage is going to protect you?" "I know about the baby, Harper. I saw the vitamins in your apartment." I didn't flinch. I leaned in, my lips inches from his ear. "Those vitamins are for a Thorne heir, Julian. If you so much as whisper otherwise, Sebastian will not only take your $120 million deal, he will take your company, your reputation, and the very air you breathe. Try me." I pulled back, flashing a brilliant hollow smile for the benefit of the surrounding cameras. "Oh, and Julian, I sent a gift to your office this morning. A bill for the 3 years of my life you wasted. Consider it a late wedding present." "You bitch," Julian growled, reaching out to grab my arm. Before his fingers could even graze my skin, Sebastian's hand was there, crushing Julian's wrist in a grip that made the billionaire gasp. "Careful, Julian," Sebastian said, his eyes turning into shards of ice. "The cameras are watching, and I have very little patience for men who lay hands on my wife. If you touch her again, I won't use lawyers. I'll use my bare hands. Do we understand each other?" The tension was a physical weight. Julian looked around, realizing the vultures of the press were already circling, their lenses focused on his humiliated expression. He yanked his hand back, his chest heaving. "This isn't over, Harper. You can't hide behind his money forever." "I'm not hiding, Julian," I said, taking a glass of sparkling cider from a passing waiter and raising it in a mocking toast. "I'm standing right in front of you. And for the first time in my life, you look very, very small." We turned our backs on him, walking away with a synchronized grace that left Julian standing alone in the center of his own gala. "You're shaking again," Sebastian noted as we reached a quiet balcony. "This time," I said, looking at the New York skyline with a fierce, burning clarity, "it's because I'm enjoying it." The morning after the gala, the whirlwind romance of Harper Vance and Sebastian Thorne was plastered across every tabloid from Manhattan to London. But inside the mahogany-lined conference room of Thorne and Associates, the mood was far from celebratory. The air was thick with the scent of bitter coffee and the tension of an impending siege. "He's filed it," Marcus, Sebastian's lead counsel, said as he slid a thick blue folder across the table. "A petition for a prenatal paternity test and a preemptive injunction for custody rights. Julian Blackwell isn't just coming for the child, Harper. He's filed a suit claiming fraudulent inducement of marriage against Sebastian, alleging you two conspired to kidnap his heir." I felt a surge of cold, white-hot fury. "Kidnap? I am the mother! How can I kidnap my own body?" I slammed my hand on the table, the $120,000 diamond catching the harsh fluorescent light. "He doesn't want the baby, Marcus. He wants the leverage. He wants to punish me for walking away." Sebastian, who had been staring out at the skyline, turned around. His face was a mask of lethal calm. "He's using a scorched earth policy. He thinks if he drags our names through the mud, I'll settle to protect the Thorne reputation." He looked at me, his gaze intense. "But he forgot one thing. I don't settle with terrorists." "We need a counterstrike," I hissed. "I want to hit him where it actually hurts, not his ego, his wallet." Marcus cleared his throat. "Julian's $120 million merger is still in the due diligence phase. The investors are skittish. If there's even a hint of a moral turpitude scandal or a massive personal liability suit, they'll pull out." "Then we give them a landslide," I said, a dark plan forming in my mind. "Julian has a history of using company funds for personal hush money. I saw the ledgers when I lived with him. He thought I was too busy picking out wedding flowers to notice the $50,000 wire transfers to consultants who just happened to be ex-assistants he'd harassed." Sebastian walked over, leaning his hands on the back of my chair. "Are you sure, Harper? Once we open that door, Julian will come at you with everything. He'll dig up every mistake you've ever made." I stood up, facing Sebastian. I was shorter than him, but in that moment, I felt like a giant. "Let him dig. He'll find a woman he broke, but he'll also find the one who learned how to sharpen the pieces of her heart into glass. I'm not scared of him anymore, Sebastian. I'm disgusted by him." "Good," Sebastian murmured, a flicker of genuine admiration in his eyes. "Marcus, File a countersuit for $200 million. Defamation, emotional distress, and a restraining order. And get me the files on Blackwell's offshore accounts. If he wants to play in the mud, we'll bury him in it. The meeting broke, and for a moment, it was just the two of us in the quiet room. You're becoming a thorn faster than I expected, Sebastian said, his voice dropping to a lower, more intimate register. Is that a compliment or a warning? I asked, my heart doing a strange flutter that had nothing to do with the war. A compliment, he said, stepping closer. Julian Blackwell made a lot of mistakes, but the biggest one was assuming you were a prize to be kept on a shelf. You were always a weapon. He was just too arrogant to see it. I looked down at the legal papers, the names Thorne and Blackwell locked in a battle for my future. I just want this to be over. I want my child to be safe. They will be, Sebastian promised, his hand briefly covering mine. It was the first time he'd touched me without an audience, and the heat of it lingered long after he walked away. The war was no longer just about a 10-minute vow. It was about survival. And as I watched the rain begin to streak the windows again, I knew the real storm was only just beginning. The air in the Thorne penthouse had shifted. What started as a clinical business arrangement was beginning to feel like a siege within a fortress. Every morning brought a new headline, and every evening brought a new legal hurdle. But on Thursday night, the war took an unexpected turn when an uninvited ghost appeared at our doorstep. There's a woman in the lobby, Sebastian said, checking his security feed. He looked puzzled. She says her name is Maya. She claims to have worked for Julian. My blood ran cold. Maya had been Julian's personal treasurer for 5 years. She was the one who knew where every body was buried, or more accurately, where every cent was hidden. Bring her up, I said, my voice tight. If she's here, Julian has finally crossed a line even she can't stomach. Maya entered the room looking like she hadn't slept in a week. She clutched a leather briefcase to her chest as if it were a shield. She didn't look at the luxury surrounding her. She looked straight at me with a mixture of guilt and terror. Harper, she breathed. I saw the news. I saw what he's doing to you with the paternity suit. It's a lie. All of it. We know it's a lie, Maya, I said, guiding her to a chair. The baby is mine, but Julian wants to use the legal system to cage me. No, you don't understand, Maya interrupted, her voice trembling. She opened the briefcase and pulled out a stack of encrypted ledgers. Julian doesn't want the baby because he cares about an heir. He wants the baby because of the trust fund. His grandfather's will states that if Julian doesn't produce a biological child by his 33rd birthday, he loses his 40% stake in Blackwell Holdings to his sister, Clara. Sebastian leaned forward, his eyes sharpening like a hawk's. And when is his 33rd birthday? In 3 weeks, Maya whispered. He's broke, Sebastian. The $120 million merger is a sham to cover up the fact that he's been embezzling from the employee pension fund to pay off his gambling debts in Macau. If he doesn't get legal custody, or at least a certified claim to your child, he loses everything. The room went silent. The sheer scale of Julian's depravity made my stomach churn. He didn't just want to control me. He wanted to use my unborn child as a financial bailout. He was never going to marry me, I realized, the epiphany hitting me like a physical blow. He stood me up because he was waiting to see if he could find a way to get the stake without the wife. But when I married you, he panicked. This is the smoking gun, Sebastian said, his voice vibrating with a dark, predatory joy. He took the ledgers from Maya. This doesn't just win the custody battle. This puts Julian Blackwell in a federal penitentiary for the next 20 years. There's one more thing, Maya said, looking at me with tear-filled eyes. He's hired a private investigator to look into Sebastian. He's looking for a way to prove your marriage is a sham. He's tracking your movements, Harper. He knows you sleep in separate rooms. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. We had been careful, but in a house full of staff and high-tech security, secrets had a way of bleeding through the cracks. Sebastian stood up and walked over to me. For the first time, he didn't just touch my arm or my back. He took both of my hands in his grip warm and terrifyingly solid. Then we stopped sleeping in separate rooms, he said, his gaze locking onto mine. Sebastian? I whispered. The help talks. The walls have ears. If we're going to survive the next 3 weeks until his birthday, we have to be inseparable. Truly. No more daybeds, Harper. No more sitting rooms. He turned to Maya. Go to the safe house my team prepared. You're under Thorn protection now. Julian can't touch you. After Maya left, the penthouse felt smaller, more intimate. The city lights outside seemed to press against the glass. You don't have to do this, I said, looking at Sebastian. We can find another way to trick him. It's not a trick anymore, Sebastian said, stepping into my space. The air between us was electric, charged with the lingering adrenaline of the war and something far more dangerous. He's coming for my family, Harper. Whether this started as a contract or not, you are carrying a child that the world believes is mine, and I protect what is mine. I looked at this man, this stranger I had married in a fit of pique, and realized that he was the only thing standing between me and a monster. But as I looked into his dark, determined eyes, I wondered if I was simply trading one kind of fire for another. 10 minutes, I whispered, echoing the words from City Hall. That's all it took to change everything. Best 10 minutes of my life, Sebastian murmured, before leaning down to close the distance between us. The air in the master suite was thick with the scent of Sebastian's sandalwood cologne and the unspoken tension of our new reality. For the first time, the double doors were locked from the inside, not to keep each other out, but to keep the world's prying eyes from seeing the truth. Sebastian lay on one side of the massive king-sized bed, and I on the other. A vast expanse of charcoal silk between us that felt like a battlefield. You're thinking too loud, Harper, Sebastian murmured into the darkness. His voice was a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the mattress. I'm thinking about the 3-week countdown, I admitted, staring at the ceiling. Julian is like a cornered rat, and rats are most dangerous when they have nowhere left to run. He's already running, Sebastian countered. He just doesn't know he's on a treadmill. Maya's ledgers are being verified by my forensic accountants as we speak. By the time his birthday hits, the SEC will be waiting for him with a set of silver handcuffs. But Julian didn't wait for his birthday. 3 days later, the trap sprung, but not the one we expected. I was leaving a prenatal appointment at a quiet clinic in the West Village, flanked by 2 of Sebastian's best security guards. As we approached the SUV, a black sedan screeched around the corner, blocking our path. 2 men stepped out, but it wasn't Julian. It was a process server and a man I recognized as Julian's primary fixer, a disgraced ex-cop named Miller. Mrs. Thorne, Miller said, his voice like grinding gravel. We have an emergency court order for an immediate medical intervention. Mr. Blackwell has filed a claim that you are being held against your will and that the health of the fetus is at risk due to coercive control by Sebastian Thorne. That's a lie, I shouted, stepping back as the security guards moved to intercept. I am here by choice. The judge signed the order, ma'am, Miller sneered, holding up a document. A psychiatric evaluation and a blood draw. Right now. We have an ambulance waiting to take you to a neutral facility. I realized then what Julian was doing. He didn't need to win the case. He just needed to get me away from Sebastian's protection. Once I was in a neutral facility, one likely on his payroll, he could force the paternity test or worse. My phone buzzed. A text from Sebastian. Don't fight them. Go with them. I'm right behind you. Trust the plan. I felt a cold shiver. Trust the plan? What plan? But I looked at Miller and squared my shoulders. Fine, I'll go. But if you touch me, my husband will make sure you never see the sun again. They took me to a private clinic in Jersey City, a cold, sterile building that felt more like a prison. They put me in a room and told me to wait. An hour passed. Then 2. My heart was a drum in my chest, fear for my baby finally overriding my rage. The door opened, and Julian walked in. He looked disheveled, his tie loose, his eyes bloodshot with a manic gleam. You really thought you could win, Harper? He laughed, a jagged, broken sound. You thought you could trade up to a thorn and I'd just let you go? That kid in your belly is my golden ticket. Once the blood test comes back, I'm taking custody. I'll prove you're mentally unstable for marrying a stranger 10 minutes after we broke up. You'll never see this baby again. You're a monster, Julian, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. I stood up, moving toward the window. You don't want a child. You want a shield for your debts. I want what's mine, he screamed, lunging toward me. The door didn't just open, it exploded inward. Sebastian stepped through the frame like a dark god of vengeance, followed by 4 federal agents and Marcus. Actually, Julian, Sebastian said, his voice echoing with a lethal chill. Nothing here is yours. Not the clinic, not the doctors you bribed, and certainly not my wife. Thorne? How did you... Julian started, backing away. We leaked the psychiatric strategy to your fixer days ago, Marcus said, holding up a recording device. We wanted you on record, in a non-state monitored facility, admitting to the embezzlement and the fraudulent intent of this custody suit. We've been recording this entire conversation, Julian, including your admission that the child is a golden ticket to cover your debts. Julian looked at the federal agents, his face turning a ghostly white. You set me up. No, I said, stepping beside Sebastian and taking his hand. I felt the strength in his fingers, the solid reality of him. You set yourself up 3 years ago when you started thinking people were property. The war is over, Julian, and you lost everything. As the agents moved in to read Julian his rights, Sebastian pulled me into his arms. I buried my face in his chest, the scent of sandalwood finally bringing me peace. Is it really over? I whispered. The war with him is, Sebastian murmured, kissing the top of my head. But our story? That's just getting to the good part. The marble hallways of the New York State Supreme Court felt like a mausoleum for Julian Blackwell's ambitions. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and the quiet hum of an ending. This was the day of the final hearing, the moment the legal ties between my past and my future would be severed forever. I walked down the corridor with my head held high, the click of my heels echoing like a countdown. Sebastian walked beside me, his hand a steady weight on the small of my back. He hadn't left my side since the night at the clinic. He had become my shield. But more than that, he had become the only person who truly saw the fire beneath my skin. Look at them, Sebastian whispered, nodding toward the gallery. The Blackwell legal team looked like they were attending a funeral. Julian sat at the defense table, his expensive suit hanging off a frame that had withered in the 10 days since his arrest. His face was sallow, his eyes darting toward the doors as if expecting a miracle that was never coming.
"All rise,"
the bailiff intoned. Judge Miller, a man known for his intolerance of corporate theatrics, took the bench. He looked down at the mountain of evidence, the recordings, Maya's ledgers, and the records of the bribed doctors.
"Mr. Blackwell,"
the judge began, his voice echoing with profound disappointment.
"In my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a calculated misuse of the family court system. You didn't file for custody out of love or concern. You filed as a desperate maneuver to hide a crumbling financial empire built on the backs of your own employees."
"Your Honor, if I may," Julian's lawyer started, but the judge silenced him with a single look.
"You may not. The evidence of embezzlement and federal fraud is being handed over to the district attorney."
"As for the matter of the child," the judge looked at me, his expression softening for a fraction of a second. "The petition for a forced paternity test is denied. The marriage between Harper Thorne and Sebastian Thorne is recognized as valid and stable. Mr. Blackwell, you are hereby barred from seeking any further contact with the petitioner or her child. A permanent restraining order is in effect, effective immediately." The gavel struck the wood with a finality that made my heart leap. It was done. Julian stood up abruptly, his chair screeching against the floor.
"You think you won, Harper?"
he shouted, his voice cracking with a desperate, pathetic rage.
"You're just a pawn for him. He'll discard you the moment his mother passes. You're nothing but a contract."
I didn't flinch. I walked toward the bar, standing inches away from the man who had ghosted me 3 times, the man who had tried to steal my child for a trust fund. "You're wrong, Julian," I said, my voice echoing with a cold, clear power. "I was a pawn when I was with you. I was the girl who waited for a phone call that never came. With Sebastian, I'm a partner.
But most importantly, I am a mother who will burn your world to the ground if you ever mention my child again. Guards, please take this man away. He's polluting the air."
As Julian was led out in handcuffs, screaming about his legacy, I felt a weight lift off my soul that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The room emptied, leaving only Sebastian and me in the golden afternoon light filtering through the high windows.
"He's gone, Harper,"
Sebastian said, turning me to face him. "The Blackwell name is being stripped from the buildings. The merger is dead. He's losing everything." "I don't care about what he lost," I said, looking up into Sebastian's dark eyes, finding a warmth there that wasn't in the contract. "I only care about what I've found."
"And what is that?"
he asked, his voice dropping to a low, intimate murmur. "A reason to stop running," I whispered. He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. "The contract ends when my mother passes, Harper. You know that. You'll have the money, the house, and the security." "Is that what you want?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. "For it to end?" Sebastian didn't answer with words. Instead, he pulled me into a kiss that tasted of victory and something far more terrifying, a new beginning. In that moment, the 10-minute vow we had made in a fit of rage became something else entirely. It became a promise. 7 months later, the air in the Thorne penthouse was no longer thick with the scent of legal documents and war rooms. Instead, it smelled of fresh lilies and the sweet, powdery scent of a new beginning. The floor-to-ceiling windows showed a New York spring in full bloom, vibrant, chaotic, and full of life. I sat in a velvet rocking chair by the window, cradling a bundle of soft blue blankets. Lucas Sebastian Thorne was only 2 weeks old, but he already had his father's stubborn chin and a quiet intensity in his dark eyes. He was the living proof that out of the ashes of betrayal, something beautiful could grow. A soft knock at the door preceded Sebastian. He wasn't wearing his usual armored three-piece suit. His sleeves were rolled up, and his expression, once a mask of cold granite, melted the moment he saw us. "Is he finally asleep?" Sebastian whispered, kneeling beside the chair. "For now," I smiled, brushing a thumb over Lucas's cheek. "He's a thorn after all. He doesn't like to miss a moment of the action." Sebastian reached out, his large hand gently covering mine and the baby's. We sat in silence for a long time, watching the sun dip below the Hudson River. This was the peace we had fought for, a peace that had cost Julian Blackwell his freedom and nearly cost us our sanity. Julian was currently serving a 15-year sentence for racketeering and embezzlement. He was a ghost of the past, a cautionary tale of greed. "I saw the lawyers today," Sebastian said quietly, his voice neutral. I felt a sudden, sharp pang in my chest. "The contract?" "It's been 6 months since my mother passed," he said, referring to the peaceful morning in May when Eleanor had slipped away, a smile on her face because she believed her son was finally loved. "Technically, according to the agreement we signed at City Hall, the terms have been met. The trust is settled. Your personal account has been credited with the final settlement of $10 million. You are a free woman, Harper. You can take the baby, move to Paris, and never see me again." The silence that followed was deafening. I looked down at the gold band on my finger, the one that had started as a spiteful impulse. I thought about the woman I was that rainy night in the clerk's office, broken, vengeful, and terrified. Then I looked at the man beside me, the stranger who had become my fortress, my confidant, and the only person who truly knew the shape of my soul. "Is that what you want?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "For me to be free of you?" Sebastian stood up, walking to the window. His back was to me, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "I want you to be happy, Harper. I forced you into a world of vultures and scandals. I used your pain to satisfy my mother's dying wish. I've given you every reason to hate the name Thorne." I stood up, carefully placing the sleeping Lucas in his bassinet. I walked over to Sebastian and turned him around, forcing him to look at me. "You didn't force me into anything, Sebastian. You gave me a weapon when I was unarmed. You gave me a home when I was homeless. And most importantly," I took his hand and placed it over my heart, "you gave me a reason to believe that a 10-minute mistake could be the best decision of my life." Sebastian's eyes darkened with a raw, vulnerable hope. "Harper, I don't want the settlement, Sebastian, and I don't want the guest room or the daybed." I stepped into his space, my voice firm. "I want to renew the vows, for real this time. No clerks, no spite, and no Julian. Just us." A slow, genuine smile broke across Sebastian's face, the kind of smile that changed the entire atmosphere of the room. He leaned down, his forehead resting against mine. "I ripped up the contract months ago, Harper. I just needed to know if you had too. I burned mine the day Lucas was born," I confessed, laughing softly through a stray tear. He pulled me into a deep, lingering kiss, a kiss that wasn't for the cameras or the help or the dying wishes of a matriarch. It was a kiss for the future. As the stars began to twinkle over the Manhattan skyline, I realized that life doesn't always give you the fairy tale you planned. Sometimes it gives you a storm. But if you're brave enough to say okay to a stranger in the rain, you might just find the person who will walk through the lightning with you. We weren't just a headline anymore. We weren't a scandal or a strategic merger. We were a family. And as I watched Sebastian look at our son with a pride that no $120 million deal could ever provide, I knew that the best chapters of our story were the ones we hadn't even written yet. Don't waste tears on the wrong person. Stay fierce and know your worth. The right one is waiting at the turn you least expect. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more dramatic stories.